welcome everybody. Lovely to see you, Claudio. Thank you for being here. I have been like a cat on hot bricks all afternoon, and I just need to offload, if everybody will just permit me. I used to run for, as you probably read, but my nurseries have now been closed for about 7 years, and about 7 years before that, so about 14 years ago, I actually employed men. I think we were really very, very forward thinking. As a setting, we were outstanding. We had lots of awards, and we were very confident in our practice. And I was very keen on, I used to listen to research and would jump on the bandwagon. For example, I started my first nursery, we only took 3s to 5s. I desperately wanted to do babies, but it wasn't considered to be the done thing to do. And then research came out to say that actually babies thrive when they have nursery opportunities. So immediately went into babies. And then another example was when Makaton was considered to be, research showed it was good for children, every child's language development. So we went straight into Makaton. So we were very forward thinking. But I just think, even now, that settings need to be very secure in their pedagogy and their vision and their mission and their ethos and all those cozy words that we use to employ men. Would you agree?
Yes, you've mentioned some very interesting words over there, especially with regards to confidence and forward-thinking setting. And these are two huge qualities that I think nurseries these days have to have when it comes to recruitment and retention of their members of staff. I feel like that, you know, considering that you were employing men 7 years ago, that's very commendable.
No, 14.
14. Oh, yeah. Right. Sorry. That's even more commendable because I'm not sure, you know, how everybody on this session is, how familiar the people on this session are about the statistics around, you know, the percentage of men working in early years. But over the last 20 to 30 years, it hasn't really improved at all. You know, at the moment we are oscillating between the 2% and 3% of the very low, unfortunately. So the statistics have been updated by the DFE December last year. And before that, the previous census was carried out in 2021. But again, even before 2021, the situation wasn't any better or any worse. It was still the same. So that really led me to believe that there are two possible scenarios on this. Either we are not recruiting men at all in our nurseries, or we are recruiting them and they're not staying.
Right, on that front, alongside my nurseries, I ran a cash training centre. Okay, and all the men that I employed were trainees. They weren't necessarily young. There were a few mature people. There was actually one that used to come to my nursery as a child. Right. But out of all of them, only one of them achieved their qualification. So although they didn't come and go quickly, okay, you know, they weren't there for a couple of months and then leave, you know, but they didn't stay to complete their qualifications. And I think that's quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean,
whereas now there are quite a lot of prominent men who I hoped might come this evening out there who are working in senior positions or are consultants. So something has changed in that time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's it doesn't really surprise me, unfortunately, when you said that, you know, many didn't stick around for too long, and that's something that resonates a lot with my own experience and my practice back in the days. Unfortunately, not that I ever left the industry, because I'm still here, I'm still smiling about it, but there have been quite a lot of occasions in my career, specifically the first year working in early years, where I questioned myself a lot. I questioned whether or not the early years industry was a sector suitable for me. And I really struggled to feel like I belonged in the industry. Obviously, this is something that a lot of men experience out there. So I'm not saying this is something that happened to me only, but I had quite a few parents, requesting that I would engage in intimate care routines with their children, for example. And luckily, I've always had a really supportive manager on my side. But it really made me question, whether or not I was in the right place, in the right job. Every day I was bringing my 100% of myself into the classroom. I was bringing loads of experiences for the children, and I was really loving the job in itself, specifically with the interaction with the parents as well, and knowing that I was not just catering to the children in our classroom, but to the overall needs of our entire families. So, coming across a situation where a parent might have requested me not to change the child's nap, it just felt like a little bit like a stab in my back, really. And it's unfair to say, because obviously there are many other families out there that were supportive and they understood me. But as a 19-year-old boy, when you don't have a lot of experience and you're still trying to figure out where you are in life, even just one episode, can be quite detrimental to your.
Well, anything negative said to any of us practitioners who are passionate about what we do, we would take it badly, wouldn't we? We do. Yeah. We take it badly. I need to just correct myself, actually. One man was actually qualified, and to my knowledge, he is still practicing today. And the one that did complete their qualification, to my knowledge, is still working in early years. So that's a good result, isn't it?
That's a huge win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? I think, we've had a bit of headline news in Australia. Well, it hasn't become headline news here, has it? Really, it hasn't hit the headlines here. But there was this awful scenario in Australia, and the backlash was groups, I believe, were stopping their men, if they employed them, carrying out intimate care. And my immediate reaction to that was, well, we've just had some high profile women in the news that have abused, or one's even killed a child, and my battery's now running low. That's okay. So I plugged it in. And if we took that stance, then no women should be working in early years, should they? No. But because, murder is just as bad, I think. Knee-jerk reactions are really sad. And you mentioned about parents, and I think the best early years settings educate their parents, not just about men, but about everything, how their child can get involved with how they can get involved with their child's learning, not just send a few photos and pacify parents, we're doing a good job, you can go to work, you don't need to worry. And today I published a really short video about cultural capital. We can gain such a lot, build that first relationship by asking parents about, what the children likes to do at home and what do they do at weekends and all those sorts of things, and build those relationships. When we can bring in why we employ men, etc., can't we? Right at the very, very beginning.
No, absolutely.
So I do think you have to have personally, I do think you have to have strategies for the parents to help them understand and reassure them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, on the Australia situation, obviously, I was devastated when that news blew. Obviously, I'm quite close to a community of male educators operating in Australia, working in Australia. So obviously, they were telling me all the insights. And, obviously, the episode in itself was just terrible. It's just knowing the psychological impact that's going to have on the children involved, the families involved, the children and families, actually mostly the families of those who are never going to know whether or not something has happened to their children or not. Obviously, I'm not sure how familiar people are on the news over there, but somebody's, a male educator has been charged with 73 offenses involving 8 children. And that resulted in around 2,000 children being tested for STIs. Again, terrible. Well, as a community of male educators, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of every single member of our organization, we condemned these sort of events. We are safeguarding allies, and we do recognize and we empathize, with the families and children involved in that. However, what has happened with the banning of men, changing children's nappies in one major nursery group, to me, that's not tolerable at all, because it's a policy that's been implemented based on fear and not facts. I think it's that what has happened has been.
Is it just fear though? Right, fear for their business.
Yes, fear for the business, because ultimately what they wanted to do with that policy, they wanted to reassure parents that they were taking, immediate action, responding, to what has happened. Unfortunately, what has been spread a lot in the news. I mean, I managed to find some information about the history of that educator, but we found out that that educator has worked in 23 settings since 2017, and then after that, in one of the settings, he was dismissed during his probationary period because of he didn't handle properly an incident report or multiple incident reports. I'm not sure how many. And then at his next employment, there were some allegations made against him mishandling children in an aggressive way. So to me, I really don't understand how the member of staff managed to get employed in that many nurseries. Obviously, I've worked in recruitment full time myself as well. And, the moment I see somebody who's worked in 23 different nurseries, I would automatically just have a red flag in my mind saying, what's going on here?
He's not very old, is he? Now,
no,
late 20s, isn't he?
It was over the course of 8 years. So 23 settings in 8 years, that's a lot. That's job hopping, essentially. That should really make, any recruiter or manager questions the motives of that member of staff, but not on a gender basis. That should happen.
No, any gender. Yeah.
Which is why I think, this is like the result of a systemic failure rather than gender-related incident. I really empathize with the community of male educators there in Australia, because they are having to deal with a lot of disagreements, and many educators at the moment are feeling like scrutinized even more than they were before. Again, lack of sense of belonging in the industry. They're feeling really not motivated to work, because again, they feel like they obviously
being victimized themselves.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Do they employ more men in Australia in nurseries than we do here? Do you know?
No,
about the same.
Similar. So the statistics are pretty much quite similar across the globe. Germany, Australia, United States. We do work with some American educators as well, and they're saying the situation is not any better there. But with Australia at the moment, the stigma around it has worsened a lot because of the episodes of safeguarding. Obviously, I really can't see something like that happening here in the UK unless
we've got new safeguarding reforms, haven't we, coming in about a month's time, where safer recruitment has become more important, has come higher on the agenda. I think a lot of people were doing a lot of those things anyway. We certainly were 7 years ago. But it's going to be more mandatory with checks and references and all the other things that we have to do when we recruit. But I think that's a good move, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agree. As long as any new updates in any policy is carried out in an unbiased way against any protected characteristics, then it's great. Because unfortunately, I've witnessed in my career quite a few times
Right.
differences in the way recruiters and managers would carry out interviews to men versus women.
Really?
Yes.
That goes against the Equal Opportunities Act of whatever it is, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, not unfortunately. Fortunately, yes. Unfortunately, I witnessed it. So yes, it's the stigma is still there. Unfortunately, it's something that we are striving to tackle as an organization, and ultimately, that's what prompted me, to found male childcare and teaching jobs. We are not just in it to spread awareness, raise awareness of gender inclusivity and gender equality, but we actively want to encourage more boys and men to pursue teaching careers in early years. And ultimately, we want to focus on that retention as well, because obviously there's no point in attracting more boys and men into the industry if we don't have the right systems in place in our nurseries to be able to support them.
I mean, historically, forgetting about abuse, but historically, men wouldn't go into early years because of the pay. The man was seen as the main breadwinner in the family, and therefore early years just didn't pay enough. So it wouldn't have even been considered as a career for men in past decades. I mean, we're not paid enough now, are we?
Yeah.
I think that's not so much the case anymore, because most low-paid jobs are paid minimum wage, aren't they? So that doesn't count so much now.
Yeah.
People that are listening tonight, please comment. Have you employed men? What are your challenges around the situation? I mean, we're talking about the challenges here, but we could talk about all the benefits of having men. Because certainly the children in my nurseries gained enormously from having men in the team. There is also another challenge, though, I think, with hiring men. They do think differently. A bit like Gen Z, or Gen Z, whatever you say. You have to meet their needs, just like hopefully you'll meet every individual member of staff's needs, like you meet every individual child's needs. But you have to take that on board.
Yeah, I would agree with you, because there's actually quite a lot of research that's been done around how men and women think differently, act differently, and ultimately educate differently as well. So one of the first bits of research that comes to my mind is the level of impulsiveness that differs between men and women, starting from the job application all the way to carrying out everyday tasks and activities. So there was one article that I read on Business Review, Harvard Business Review, that stated that women are very likely to apply for a job only when they meet 100% of the criteria and job specifications, whereas men are usually applying when they meet only 60%. Which I resonate with as well. I'm a little bit of a risk taker myself, but that just shows like how differently we think.
Is it a risk, or is it, well, as you say, it's impulsive? I really fancy this job, so I'll apply for it. Whereas a woman would sit and look at it and think, "Oh, am I going to succeed? And do I match the?" Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, they would have a more like thoughtful approach to it. So they were like, they would say like, "Oh, if I apply, am I going like against the odds?" Or so yeah, they have a more reasoned approach to it, whereas men, they just go for it and then hope for the best. Let's say in that way, which I had myself in the past, not just regarding job applications, but also like with business and activities that I was doing with the children. And sometimes that can be positive. Often we think about in the moment planning or responsive planning, when you have to be super responsive to the interests of the children and plan an activity there and there.
I call it on the go, doing everything on the go.
Yes. So, there's, again, pros and cons in doing that, because if you're doing an activity that's a little bit too risky, you've got to risk assess it and consider, the impact that's going to have on children. But ultimately, you do need a little bit of a, push, being impulsive in early years, I think. I remember one of my lunch covers in the nursery I was running. He used to come to nursery on a skateboard, and children used to witness his arrival every day, and they were going absolutely crazy. They really wanted to play with his skateboard. They wanted to get on it. So day after day, they kept on asking him, to the point that he just let them get on the skateboard one day. So I let you imagine. So he was like letting them run, being on the skateboard, like indoors, without necessarily making a safe space for them to do so. So I let you imagine the level of disagreement that the rest of the team had with regards to that activity. So what we decided to do ultimately was to have a sit down. We had a meeting all together, the entire team. We obviously evaluated the activity, the risks associated to it, but also the potential learning outcome that it could have had for the children. Let alone, the fact that children just loved it. So that would have meant instant engagement, which obviously leads to lots of benefits. And yeah, we sort of like had a discussion all together as a team, and then we ultimately decided to buy child-sized skateboards.
Lovely, well done.
Child-sized elbow pads, knee pads, helmets, of course. And then we designated a specific area within the nursery, and sometimes outdoors in the local park as well, to carry out this activity. And the outcome of that was amazing. First of all, children loved it. Then obviously we were covering several areas of development and learning, from balancing to coordination, all different aspects of the physical development. And ultimately the parents loved it as well. So we became the nursery in Fulham that was doing skateboard clubs with the children, because we turned it into a club. So we made it like a weekly thing, of course. We didn't. We had to turn like a little bit into a marketing benefit as well. And the families were coming to us asking about the skateboard activities that we were doing with the children. And it was amazing. It was just so lovely, and that was an amazing example of how an initially impulsive behavior, with the thoughtful and reasoned approach of other members of staff, turned into an amazing experience for the children and staff and parents alike. So definitely I agree when you say that we do think a bit differently sometimes. I think there's something about like sensation-seeking behavior and risk-taking. There's some research on ResearchGate that was mentioning these two words exactly: sensation-seeking and risk-taking. Which
if we look at little boys versus little girls, they play very differently, and that's something that I noticed with the men. They were literally lying on the ground with the children, whereas the women tended to sit at tables, for example. And children need that, don't they? And boys particularly need good role models. They might not have a male role model at home at all. And there was some research at the time about children who didn't have a male role model never saw a man reading the newspaper. It just shows how long ago it was. Don't have newspapers now. So little boys didn't see themselves as needing to read,
exactly, yeah.
And then there are skills like woodwork and I don't know. Well, we did woodwork anyway. Many nurseries don't do woodwork, but we do woodwork anyway. And it certainly wouldn't be the men that was necessarily supervising the woodwork table. But, they perhaps would gravitate towards it more than the women.
very interesting points you've touched upon there, both with regards to the woodworking activity, but also the diversity of role models that we're providing children. So obviously, you know, we live in a society where family dynamics are changing a lot. So you might get, you know, loads of single parents, same gender parents as well. So, you know, being able to have a classroom where you are able to provide diversity of genders, displaying the same traits and the same behaviors and the same leadership as well, you're sending a really strong message to those boys and girls both, that, you know, that men and women can do the same jobs. We can display nurturing traits equally as well. So, you know, one of our mentors, we had a webinar the other day, and he was saying how during circle time he always like displays vulnerability to his children. So whenever, you know, we talk about feelings during a circle time, he would always be saying that he was having a, you know, not so okay day when he wasn't, and he would give reasons, obviously, you know, in a child appropriate way, but again, that sends a really strong message to specifically boys to say that it's okay to share your feelings. It's okay to say it when you're not having a good day. And ultimately that has a massive impact in the way these boys are growing and get into society. And if every educator was like that, or if every nursery was able to provide that to those boys, we would probably see many lower rates of issues that men are, yes, exactly, that men are experiencing these days. Because unfortunately, you know, we were all brought up in a society, including myself, where we're encouraged to bottle up, to
be a man.
not play, yeah, exactly that. And that's one of the challenges that I experienced myself working in nurseries as well, because surrounded by women, I would never say or express any time that I wasn't feeling good or okay. You know, I would always like hide behind the sentence, "Oh, I'm fine," even though I wasn't. Which hopefully, you know, encourages many female leaders out there to think twice when they ask their male educator how they're doing, and they respond with just that I'm fine. Sometimes we're not really fine, and you know, it's sensible, I think, to dig in a bit more, you know.
I mean, it seems to be a common courtesy. You write an email, I hope you're well, ? People ask you, how are you today? Yesterday I was asked, yesterday afternoon, politely, now, how are you today? And I said, well, actually, I've got a bit of a headache. But a lot of people just say they're fine, don't they? Both sexes, I think, will say they're fine when they're not. And I can't be dishonest and say I'm fine if I'm not. I'm just not like that. So if anybody asks me, they get what it is, you know. But that's very, you know, it's very true that boys need to see men being vulnerable and opening up.
Yes,
I actually brought that before.
And ultimately, that's quite a positive experience for girls as well, in my opinion. Because let's say when you have male educators interacting with younger girls, let's say preschool or 2-year-olds, you're essentially equipping girls to develop that confidence and skills to communicate with a friendly adult of a different gender. And that's only going to help them when they grow up and they get into the employability world, when they potentially might choose a sector that's predominantly male dominated, let's say. So obviously we get quite a constant issue of certain industries like tech, science, you know, STEM, business. They're quite heavily male populated industries. But again, if we manage to tackle those gender stereotyping from forming in the classroom by having both men and women educating the same way, being allocated duties in the same way, and again displaying the same feelings, that's going to have a massive impact, you know, in the way girls and boys choose careers when they grow up.
And it's actually not just early years this is happening in. If you look at primary schools, majority of primary school staff are female. The head teacher is more likely to be female. And if it is male, they're more interested, in my opinion, in the older age group of the school. So I think, this isn't just an early years scenario, is it? It's an early education scenario. And yes. I say this time and time, and I'm sorry if you've heard me say it before, but what we learn in kindergarten is what actually helps us get on in life. When we go for jobs, we might get an interview because we have a qualification, which our early years actually helps us get, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. But it's the soft skills that actually get us the job.
Yes.
And all those things like passing the biscuits round, or taking turns, learning how to get on with each other, is what actually gets us the jobs that we have in our later years.
Yeah, and that is music to my ears, because that's exactly the kind of stuff that we advocate for when we go and talk to secondary school boys, or men who are planning to change careers maybe. Unfortunately, there seems to be this misconception around the fact that the older the age group you teach, the more prestigious the job. Like, obviously, you can see that the male representation in secondary school is...
certainly primary school teachers are much more important than an early years practitioner.
Exactly, yeah. So that's something that we are completely trying to scrap away when we go and talk to boys around early years careers. And we try and emphasize the fact that the real magic happens when the children are under 5, and that's where you're really, really forming them as individuals and confident adults when the time comes. And funnily enough, I know quite a few men who used to work in secondary schools before, and they were tired of seeing issues within their classrooms that could have easily been prevented at an earlier stage, and they've decided to go and work in the early years industry. And some powerful wording that they've used is they didn't look at it as in going down to early years, like moving down to early years, but moving up to early years, because that's where I
love that language. I ran a nursery in a state school. It was in a porter cabin, one of my nurseries. And I was actually asked to go and do it. And I was also ended up being a governor of the school too, but one of my I can't think what the word is, was that please never talk about going down to nursery. I think and in fact it is a society problem, this. It's a bit like when I first opened my first nursery. Nurseries didn't educate. Now I had come from I had recently done some qualifications with special educational needs sort of sphere, and every single child in my nursery had special needs. Okay, they were all different. I had little orange chairs. It was because I've been working with much older children who had language and behavioural difficulties, as it was known then, and maladjusted boys. I'd worked in a school. Horrible terms. What am I trying to say here? I don't know. I've gone off track a little bit. Sorry. It'll come back to me in a minute. Let's carry on talking.
Was it something to do with the way education was seen in the past?
I don't know. Sorry, Claudio, I've gone off. It'll come back to me before the end of the conversation. I'm sure.
That's okay. No worries.
We've got somebody who has always employed males, and we've got somebody who's never had a man apply in the past. Now that's the other thing, isn't it? We're in a recruitment crisis right now. We don't have enough nursery staff. We have nursery staff leaving the sector for various reasons, good reasons often, but various reasons, and yet people are not getting males apply for jobs. It's interesting, isn't it?
I think we are in a chicken and egg situation with that topic, because we don't really get a lot of secondary school leavers, let's say male ones, actively wanting to pursue a career in early years. They don't see it as a job that's masculine. They don't see it as, they generally genderize the role for it to be a feminine kind of activity. And that's primarily because they don't really see a lot of representation in the sector. So one of the things that I always recommend the nurseries to do when you do have a male staff or a male educator, a male leader, whatever, to put them in the front line whenever you're engaging in recruitment events, whether that's recruitment fairs or, you know, attending assemblies in secondary schools, or even like in marketing material. Do highlight the fact that you have men working in your setting, because that's the first step that you can take to.
Certainly, I think that's why I ended up with so many men working for me, because once I've got a couple, then it was easy for other people to apply.
Yes.
I certainly think that's the case.
And I got into the sector because I had, and I know I talk about feelings of isolation, and probably I shouldn't, because I was actually quite lucky to have other men working alongside me, but I had 4 other men working in my first nursery setting. Not all of them quite resonated with my personality and protected characteristics, let's put it that way. But at the same time, it was 4 other men that reassured me instantly of the fact that the nursery manager was open-minded about it, and that I would be in an environment that I wouldn't feel like too much of a stranger, let's say. So definitely representation helps, and you know, can bring really positive results in your recruitment campaigns. The issue comes where you don't have men working in nursery settings. So how do you communicate that? How do you communicate your commitment to gender inclusivity and make it like an attractive career for men? So, you know, one of the things I always recommend to do is to create like a section on your website where you highlight your commitment to having more men in early years education, and that's not about like being discriminatory against other people, but again, considering all the benefits that men bring and all the research that's been done around it, that nearly makes it like an occupational requirement in a way, you know, that by having a gender diverse teaching workforce, you can ultimately work towards your, let's say, prevent duty strategy. Because what does the prevent duty tell us? That we need to be promoting the 4 British values, one of them being mutual respect for those with different faiths and beliefs. But beliefs doesn't apply just to culture and religion. You know, it's like any protected characteristic, any identity, any gender.
Absolutely.
So again, when we are really having a mixed gender teaching workforce, that's your best asset to be able to encourage gender equality amongst children in the classroom. You know,
I've just thought of something else. I've done a lot of work in China. We have bilingual software that's used in China, and the school that I have actually helped put together, you'll see it on my LinkedIn profile, they have a lot of men. It suddenly occurred to me, I didn't really think of it as being particularly different, but I would say they've probably got 30, about a third of the staff are men. And then none of them are from England. They're all from South Africa, Philippines, Russia. Where else do they come from? None of them are from England, which is very difficult when they're an EYFS nursery. Because generally, the staff didn't come from England. I have my quite a challenge there. And often from countries where the education is very formalized as well. So it's and China is very formalized in their education. So it's a big challenge there, but it's just something that's occurred to me.
Yeah, I was going to say actually.
And it's a kindergarten. So it's doesn't have a primary school that they move on to. It is purely kindergarten.
I was going to say, actually, could it be because probably I think the way nurseries are run in China, they're much more focusing on academics.
Oh yes, yes.
So
the whole education system is very different. We've got 4-year-olds almost strapped into seats in a classroom. Let's go there. But this kindergarten wants to be EYFS, you know, and is very tuned in. But it's just interesting that because they have Chinese teachers and then they have English speaking, so they can be a bilingual school.
Okay.
And
do you think there were any particular factors that may have contributed to it, like to having more men in those settings?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's just who applied for the jobs at the time. I don't think there was any whether people want work in China, and that's the sort of work that comes up, so they take. I don't know. I need to investigate that one.
I wonder if it's something to do with let's say, not so healthy stereotype of having a man so that they can be the authoritarian within a classroom. Because I've had that myself.
Yes, I can see.
In the past, here in the UK. So thinking of China and how they do things differently there, my instant thought was probably that's why they might be looking for. Not looking.
I don't think so in this instance, but I can see that happening. I can see why people might think they've got a group of children with behaviour issues, that having a man on board could make a difference. I mean, that makes me shudder, because I was very much brought up very authoritarian, very Victorian wise, by my dad. So, but also I think, going back to your teachers that moved from secondary into early years, there's so much of a difference that can be made in early years, isn't there?
Yeah, I agree.
And also not so straitjacketed either. Early years education is very holistic, or should be, and goes with the flow of the children, or should be, although obviously needs to be evaluated, but needs to be, the evaluation needs to be there. But whereas education higher up, even in reception class, can be quite, you've got to write your name.
Quite structured. Yes. Yeah.
Whether your hand muscles are formed enough to do that, forget about all the other things in life, but whether your hands are mature enough to actually hold a pencil and write your name or not, you've still got to write your name, because you're now in reception or in year one.
Yes. Yeah. And with regards to the earlier side of things, that's, I think, one of the most magical aspects of it. That you can. It can be as unstructured as you want it to be as an educator. There's no need for all those strict routines. Obviously, some routines are important, some boundaries are important to have, absolutely. But the teaching style is so different. It's not like a sit down at the table thing all the time. You're able to teach numbers, shapes, enclosures in various forms of play, in various environments, and in different ways. And one of the things I always tell our educators is, whatever passion you have in private life, whatever interest you have, you've got the magical aspect in the early years that you can bring it in the classroom, and you can cascade it onto the next generations, onto the future society. Whether you like music, whether you like the outdoor woodworking. We've got one of our nursery members, the owner comes from a DIY background. So it's the nursery is run by a couple, and the husband, him, used to work in DIY and decided to start doing woodworking activities with the children. Now, I've witnessed it myself. I was there for a couple of hours to see the activity. It was amazing. It was lovely. But what even more magical was that the owner has trained another member of staff, his female nursery manager, in doing the same activity. So they would co-lead the activity at the same time. And to me, that was an amazing example for children that, again, men and women can do the same things, same activities, and they can be supportive, nurturing at the same time as well. And they had obviously equally boys and girls attending the activity as well. So again, there was like gender equality. It was the epitome of gender equality. So obviously the man had quite a unique expertise, I would say, because unfortunately, woodworking and DIY are areas that are still quite predominantly.
I bought a drill the other day.
Oh, right.
I haven't used it yet.
How did that work out?
I haven't used it yet. No, it's
All
my
right.
weekend job. I need to put some pots on a wall.
Well done. Well done.
But that might actually be because when I was a very little girl, I'm a farmer's daughter, and we had to spend our days outside. And there was an elderly gentleman called Mr. Shepherd who used to come to the farm and do my dad's odd jobs. And I used to sit in the workshop he used to bring sweets. That was also a draw. But I used to sit in the workshop and watch him do whatever he was making or repairing. And even now, I get tremendous satisfaction about watching a man put a shelf up or building. Or I love builders. If I have builders in my house, I think it's fantastic. I love making nurseries, for example. I've always been a house builder. Even in my childhood, I used to make houses as a child with broccoli boxes and all sorts of things. But it's amazing how things stem from our childhoods, and a lot of people recognise that, and a lot of people don't. But I think it's lovely.
And that's why it's so important, to expose children to as many experiences as we possibly can, and that's where a diverse range of educators can come in quite handy. And we're not just talking about gender. We're talking about yes, exactly. All practitioners coming from all different backgrounds. Even the fact that I'm Italian myself was a massive benefit for the first nursery that I worked in, because I ended up doing Italian classes with the children I was looking after, and cooking classes as well. So we were making like pizzas and pastas and all of that. So it was like, for me, super rewarding because I was bringing a piece of my own experience and background into the classroom.
It goes back to cultural capital, which was what we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. So and I play music as well sometimes in my free time. Like I used to, at least when I was back home. So I used to be a drummer, and occasionally with the children in my preschool classroom, we would set up homemade drum sets with like pots, pans, spoons, cutlery, all sort of stuff. I let you imagine the noise in that classroom at the time, and loads of complaints from some members of staff, but we were having a blast with the children. And I had one of the parents came back to me, like complaining in a funny way, saying, "My child doesn't stop playing drums at home. Like in the evening, it's bedtime, and he just wants to like play drums." And to me, that was like the best comment I ever received, because again, you're cascading your passion, something that you really like, onto the next generations, and they will remember that. Those children will remember that
in some way they will, unconsciously perhaps.
I mean, I've got quite fond memories of my preschool days.
Do you?
Yes, I remember some teachers. I don't know what they were feeding me, if I remember well, but it's no, I do have some.
Because we're not supposed to have much of a memory before the age of 6, Claudio.
I remember anecdotes from the preschool classroom.
Okay.
Actually,
I remember sitting, and it was a nursery. I was given an apple for snack, and I'm a slow eater now, so I never finished my apple, and the apple got put on a shelf. And I can remember sitting there looking at this apple every day, wondering why it always joined up where I'd eaten. I think that's my earliest nursery memory. Anyway, come on, those people in the chat. Have you got any questions? Got any suggestions? Quite happy to. Well, I mean, this conversation can go anywhere we like. We are coming to the end of it, so please give us your opinions. Is there anything? I mean, something else, I suppose. If a man applied for a job, do you give them the job over somebody else?
Nope, because that's poor safeguarding, and that's poor.
Well, I would say the safeguarding bit would have to be dealt with. But if the safeguarding part was dealt with, would you give?
I think you should never assign a job to somebody based on a protected characteristic. It should be based on experience, background,
all the same reasons
yeah.
you'd employ the woman.
Exactly. Like it should be like, if I had the power of removing pictures from LinkedIn, I would, because LinkedIn ultimately is a professional platform. You're there to look for jobs, find stuff. Sometimes, doing business as well, B2B. But there are lots of educators out there who utilize it, as a recruitment tool. And have you ever seen? There are some countries in Europe that still do that, putting pictures on their CVs. But why do we have pictures on LinkedIn? That straight away gives you biases during a recruitment process, and again, that's not like just talking about men. We're talking about age. We're talking about backgrounds. So
I do agree with you, but then if we want our children to have male role models within our nurseries, and the men are not necessarily going to have the experience, they're not necessarily, hopefully, they're not necessarily going to have the experience, are they, that somebody else has had? Perhaps it's our recruitment process that needs to ensure that we give men equal chance of getting the job.
Absolutely. There are systems that your nursery should have in place even before you get out there looking for staff members. We're talking about your policies. We're talking about the training and development opportunities that you give your current staff members, your parents as well. You've mentioned it briefly at the beginning of that conversation. Educating parents is a key aspect of making your setting attractive to men. If I was looking for a job, and one of the first things I do, go on a nursery's website, go and see, or maybe social media platforms, and see what sort of activities they do, what kind of ethos they've got. And if I saw parents actively engaging with male educators in that setting, that for me would be the biggest selling point of that setting, because it really shows that they are taking proactive steps to create like an environment, like a culture of belonging for everyone, really, regardless.
Going back to educating parents, we had regular parents' evenings, and it wasn't to talk about their child, because our software does all that. They get that instantly with our software. But it was about helping parents understand what we did and why we did it. And I can remember this particular one. It was about educating boys, actually. Boys learning differently to girls. And we took the parents outside to play games, count things by throwing things in buckets, and ball games we did, what have you. But we were able to link it to the fact that was one of the reasons why we employed men, because men would naturally go outside and would naturally do those sorts of activities, whereas women, we have to consciously think sometimes about doing activities like that, because it doesn't come naturally to us.
How did the parents respond?
Oh no, it was fantastic. But of course, it's always the parents you want there that never turn up. But hopefully they hear about it through the grapevine of the nursery gossip, But anyway, parents to me, for all sorts of reasons, are so key to early years. Whether it be about the lack of government funding, parents need to understand. Whether it be about the lack of staffing, parents need to understand, because they can back us up big time in a much bigger way than our vote can.
Yes.
And also, obviously, we want them to help their children as much as they possibly can before they go to school, because that's when these brains are growing so quickly. And I think I still would want to employ a man over a woman in my settings. I know that's prejudice, I know, but for the children's benefit, I would want to do that. So nobody's commenting in the chat. Come on. Would you do that? Perhaps they've all gone to sleep.
Potentially.
Would you do that? Would you employ a man over a woman because you wanted the person that has never had a man apply for a job? Or even the person that has employed males, would you want to ensure that you still had males in your organisation? I'm not getting any feedback at all here. I think right at the beginning I said it's a contentious, it's a scare. It can be a scary subject, this. But I think we stick our necks out for the children in our care, or even as a consultant, I will still stick my neck out. I have a nursery at the moment who's about to close because it's a lease issue. And it's none of my business, but I can't help but help her, you know, because those children are going to really miss out if she closes. Anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Is there anything else you want to say, Claudio? Oh, here we go. The best candidate. Somebody says, I would want to employ the best candidate. And if that be a man, then so be it. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. But I also would like to enable men to be part of my workforce, personally.
And for anybody,
go on.
Anybody like you who wants to do that proactively, they are most welcome to get in touch with us, because we're there as a community led by men, where we often talk about the challenges that we experience, I would say, like, things that we hurdles that we overcome on a weekly basis. So if you ever want to get a bit of an advice on how to make your setting more inclusive and more attractive to men in general, feel free to get in touch with us, as we'll
and you're going to get all these details in a moment. Okay, folks, is there anything else you wanted to say, Claudio?
As Denise shared, always go for the best candidates ever. Ultimately, we're having a conversation about the benefits that a diverse workforce brings, but obviously, yes, diversify your gender, your teaching workforce as much as possible, as long as that doesn't come to a compromise on key areas.
I think I'll go back to what I said. I think personally, you have to make it possible for men to apply and to succeed in the selection process. I think that's where it boils down to. And then you are still employing the best candidate for the job.
Absolutely.
Without breaching any equal opportunities legislation. Yeah.
But at the same time, if you do have males applying for jobs, send them our way, because we will be able to nurture them all the way through their career. We have quite a lot going on with regards to mentoring programs at any stage of their careers as well. So we're really working on that retention of male educators as much as the attraction to the sector.
Lovely. Okay, folks, thank you very much, Claudia. I've got another little video to run. Let's see if I can do it a little bit better.